talk and think about how we are on this planet. That in fact, the fact that we merely exist on this planet is a miracle. He writes this in the context of the idea that one-celled organism would come up on a planet that's located in the Goldilocks zone in a solar system where there's a possibility of life coming to existence as relatively small, and extrapolates outward to arrive at the numbers that he did, and recognizing that life is significant and unique, each individual life is unique, and the possibility of all life coming into existence is unique in and of itself, a miracle. And I say this again on Earth Day, how exciting. But I'll remind you that this was all the more exciting for me when I was reading a book relatively recently called Finding the Mother Tree by Susan Sminard, who also gives a TED Talk where she describes the research that comprised her book. And in it, she describes unpacking and understanding the relationship that trees have. And she starts her story off in all great fashion, like a narrative. And she comes to realize the fact that there are trees that interact together through a mycelial network, all of which impact and develop so that we have an ecology system that is diverse, communicates with one another, and ultimately unique, is a miracle in and of itself. Why am I talking about the miracle of life and the fact that trees talk to each other through a mycelial network, or mushrooms? You never thought why, but if you really dig down and look inside of a tree, you'll see that sometimes there's weird stuff growing on them. That's the mushrooms. And they all communicate, and life communicates. And we're not in the movie Avatar, but it's actually here on this planet. And when we recognize that, we start to realize that there's something profound that was given to us as a gift. When God created the planet and said that we are in fact supposed to be good stewards of it, which you can read and argue that that's what part of Genesis says, he wasn't talking about that we were supposed to just be in charge of the planet. Problem that most religion teaches us is that in Genesis 2, Adam had to name all the animals. Well, in naming all of those animals, there's an implication. Because when you give something a name, it implies you have power over it, to control it and manipulate it. But when we push on read in Genesis, and we look at the story of Noah's Ark, we recognize that we're not supposed to have control over it, because the Ark narrative ends with a rainbow, that we are in fact signs that we are in partnership of God, that we're not supposed to dominate, but we are supposed to work with. Rabbi Hanania taught specifically that we are in many regards supposed to imitate God's qualities, and we're supposed to take those qualities and make them our own when contemplating how do we work with God. For example, he said God clothed the naked because he gave Adam and Eve clothes. So we are supposed to clothe the naked. Probably a good thing. We don't all need to be living on a nudist colony. We're supposed to visit the sick. Well, the Eternal One appeared to Abraham, so we're taught to visit the sick. And we know that when we go and visit the sick and bring them chicken soup, it in fact makes them all feel better. And makes us feel better. We're taught to comfort the mourner, because when Abraham died, God blessed his son Isaac. And so you're supposed to comfort the mourner. We're supposed to bury the dead, because God buried Moses on Mount Nebo, and so we should bury the dead. The upshot is, if we can imagine the list going on and on and on, just a few more steps, is that we are supposed to not only be good people, but take care of those around us. Take care of the earth. The Torah begins with an act of kindness and concludes with an act of kindness. It begins with God in Genesis creating all of us and ends with God lovingly and kindly bearing all of us. In a way, an arc of our life where God functions as a parent over us, and we in relationship function in the word, in the Latin words, imitatio Dei, of imitating God and really bringing that out in our life. I was also further struck in contemplating today with a poem by Mary Oliver. Some of you may be familiar with her works. She was a Pulitzer Prize winning poet, and the main themes of most of her poetry were the intersection between human and the natural world. She also went on to kind of discuss and contemplate the limits of human consciousness and language. But one of her most famous poems is called The Summer Day. Who made the world, she opens? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention and how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. And I would encourage you not to forget the miraculousness of your one wild and precious life, the miraculousness that brought you to this planet and allowed you to live, recognizing that the fact that your parents got together was a miracle, that they made you was a miracle, that you are here alive, healthy, and active is a miracle, that we live in a planet full of people who are miracles, on a planet living in the Goldilocks band of our solar system, another miracle, that all of the earth itself is a miracle, that Heschel reminds us that we are supposed to have and look out each day as if it were a day of uniqueness and recognize the awesomeness, the miraculousness that it is. That on this Earth Day, to be stewards of that miracle, to treat it with loving kindness, and treat ourselves with gentleness and compassion as we do so. Shabbat Shalom.